Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Before I start this video, I want to talk about Joe Flacco's contract structure being dropped. This was an interesting one about this, right? So they dropped his contract structure. So it's a $1.7 million signing bonus. That's not abnormal. And in the vet minimum base salary, the Browns put everybody on vet minimum base salary. So basically that means the contract is worth about $3 million, which means cap-wise, it's actually on par with where Kenny Pickett's cap number is. If I go to over the cap real quick, let me go to over the cap and look at this. I believe you can see what the number would be if the Browns were to move on from Joe Flacco. Yeah, so if the Browns cut Joe Flacco post June 1st, they save about $1.25 million. So that could be something that they're considering if they don't think that Joe has the juice, or if they're in camp and they see that the other guys have it more than Joe, then he's out there. But the cap commitment to Joe is actually less than it is for Kenny Pickett. Now, it's not a big amount. We're talking about the difference of saving $1 million. Both these quarterbacks are very inexpensive. But it is something to think about when you look at the Browns cap situation this year and how they're going to handle the end of the Watson deal in Cleveland. So that's something to look at. The Joe Flacco contract, it really tells you that, you know, I think the winner of that Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett conversation has a good chance to stay on the team. I don't think the loser will stay. I think the loser will probably get traded or cut or something along those lines, unless the competition is like super close and they want to keep both of them. But I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. Y'all let me know what you think about this. Now let's get to the main part of the video. I want to spend some time today talking about the other quarterback the Cleveland Browns selected. There's been a ton of conversation about Shador Sanders, the last pick of the Cleveland Browns draft. But before Shador, the Browns picked Dillon Gabriel. And I do think that pick is interesting for a number of reasons. And I think Dillon Gabriel is an interesting person to look at in the draft. Now, full disclaimer, I did not have Dillon Gabriel as a third-round pick. I thought he fit more neatly into the late fourth, fifth round category of player. But I did think of all of the quarterbacks that you would book back there with him, the Quinn Ewers, the Curtis Warks, the Riley Leonards of the world, that Dillon was the best one of those guys. So I'm not super low on Dillon Gabriel. I'm not super high on Dillon Gabriel. There's a lot of like Dillon Gabriel stands. There's a lot of people who just absolutely hate Dillon Gabriel because he's not 6'1", right? And yeah, that's one of the things you have to deal with Dillon. Dillon's like 5'11", probably 5'10" without cleats on. Not a very big guy at all. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. Not very big. He has an interesting arm as well, because he could put a lot of spin on the ball, but as far as like pushing the ball downfield with pace, he struggles to do that, right? And I think when we talk about arm strength, right, people tend to think, oh, how far you can throw the football. There's a lot of quarterbacks with weak arms who can throw the football 70 yards downfield. Will Howard, chief among them, right? He can throw the ball very far downfield, but he can't really drive the football very far, right? Like, look at the balls that he tries to drive into tight windows. That's something Dillon Gabriel really can't do outside of like 25 yards, right? He's not going to drive the football a ton, and I think that's why a lot of people consider Dillon Gabriel to be a weak-armed quarterback. Now, let's look at Dillon Gabriel's college career and why he's here in Cleveland and what the goal is going to be with him. Because I don't look at Dillon as a 3rd round pick. I look at Dillon as a 4th round pick. I think Dillon Gabriel is who they would have picked at 104. They don't have that. They didn't have that pick anymore. They had traded that pick in a bunch of swaps with the Texans. So they didn't have that pick. They took him at 93. I think of him as a 4th round pick. And that makes the pick make a lot more sense when you do think of him as a 4th round pick. Now, what Dillon has done throughout his college career is pretty respectable. Dillon Gabriel has never been a bad quarterback for any of the teams that he played for. Like UCF 2019, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, quarterback rating of 156.9, and 3,653 yards. Second year at UCF, 3,570 yards, 32 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 156 quarterback rating. Gets hurt his next year at UCF, goes and transfers to Oklahoma, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 30,000 yards. 2023 at Oklahoma, 36,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, quarterback rating of 172. And then last year at Oregon, which I would argue, I think it might have been one of his worst years in his college football career. 30 touchdowns, almost 4,000 passing yards, 6 interceptions, finished 3rd in Heisman voting, 164.9 QB rating. All things are equal. Dillon Gabriel knows how to play the quarterback position. He has over 2,000 pass attempts under his belt. He's a very, very experienced quarterback, and he's done all of that while only throwing 32 interceptions. Has never been a double-digit interception guy. Has always kept his interception percentage in the full season under 2%. So we are talking about somebody here who has flat out balled at the college football level for 5 years, right? Averaged 357 yards a game at UCF, averaged 300 yards a game his last year at Oklahoma, 275 at Oregon. We're talking about American Conference to Big 12 to Big 10, and he's played all 3 of those levels of competition, at a high level. And again, when he was at Oklahoma, that was the Big 12 was still the Big 12, right? Texas is still there those 2 years. So true Power 5 conference, not the version of the Big 12 that exists today, which is kind of a really strong conference, but with no big dog in it. And then obviously Big 10, the super conference year of the Big 10 as well. So I wouldn't look at Dillon Gabriel as if he's a bum or a scrub. And I think people have gotten a bit carried away with talking about Dillon Gabriel like that because he's short. He's not that impressive. He's been memed up for years for being the old college quarterback, right? But, I mean, this is a world where Tyler Shuck goes 40th overall because he has one good year. And I'll tell you this right now, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tyler Shuck ends up being great. I'd rather take Dillon Gabriel in the late 3rd round than Tyler Shuck at pick 40. I might even say the same thing about Jackson Dart. But you know what? This ain't the Jackson Dart slander video. So, because like if you look at the whole reason Tyler Shuck goes number 40 overall, it's because he's old and experienced. He doesn't have a quarter of the experience that Dillon Gabriel has, right? The reason Tyler Shuck goes 40th overall and Dillon Gabriel goes in the 3rd round is simple. Dillon Gabriel's 5'11", Tyler Shuck 6'5". Doesn't matter that Dillon Gabriel has put together a lot of really good college football seasons and a lot of really good conferences, high-level competition, all of that. That does not matter because he's not 6'5". And I think Dillon Gabriel serves an interesting purpose here because his purpose is not to be developmental. You don't draft Dillon Gabriel because you're trying to develop Dillon Gabriel. You draft Dillon Gabriel because you think that there might be something there that you can untap. He's 24 years old. So, he's not he's not as old as you would think for somebody who played 6 years of college. Like usually those guys are like 26. Again, Tyler Shuck is like 26. So he's not as old as you would think. When does he turn 25? He doesn't turn 25 till December. So he's going to spend this whole year 24 years old. So he's not as old as you would think, but he is old and experienced enough that he can offer something to that room. And, you know, the thing is, if Dillon Gabriel is able to play football in the NFL level, then he'll be able to play football at the NFL level pretty much right away, and you might have something there. Best case scenario with him, you end up with a very low-level starter that you can live with for a couple of years while you look for your real starter. Worst case scenario with Dillon Gabriel, you have somebody who probably will be a capable backup. Like I find it hard to believe that Dillon Gabriel will enter a football game and look lost or not know how to manage a game or manage an offense. I think, you know, if you have to go in there with a young quarterback room, or maybe you decide if you're the Browns, you're going to keep one of Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, right? So between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, whoever wins out that competition in camp, you keep one of those guys, and then you go with the two rookies behind them. And you feel good about having Dillon Gabriel as one of those rookies because Dillon Gabriel has a lot of game experience. It's a lot of different ways that quarterback room can shake out. But I think Dillon is there because he's experienced, because they know that if you put him in an offense, you tell him what to do, you coach him to do this, Dillon's going to be able to do that. The question is, will he be able to see over the middle of the field well enough to execute? And is his arm strength going to become a huge limitation for him, right? And when I'm saying arm strength, Dillon Gabriel can uncork a deep ball and throw it 45 yards downfield, no problem. That's not a big deal. Can he drive the ball into a tight window? If there's a backside dig 25 yards down the field, and there's a safety here and a linebacker here. Well, no, a linebacker here. Oh, no, it's reversed in the camera. My bad. Yeah, so there's a safety here and a linebacker here, and that dig's coming across the field. Can he sit back, rear on that back foot, and drive the ball in between those two in a straight line for 25 yards? We'll find out in preseason. If he could do that, then he might have an NFL career. And if he can't, then, you know, he's a backup. But that's the big question with him. Now, as far as how this intertwines with Shador, well, if you're looking at this from Shador's perspective, you beat out Dillon Gabriel in camp, or if you're able to beat out Dillon Gabriel in camp, then, and that, again, beating out Dillon Gabriel in camp does not mean that you surpass him on the depth chart necessarily, because I think no matter what, Shador's probably going to be the last quarterback to see the field for a number of reasons I've talked about before, but mainly Shador's the quarterback that you want to give the most time to see what he has, versus Dillon, who, you know, he's kind of a is what he is prospect, right? The same thing with Kenny Pickett. Either he's good or he's not. Same thing with Joe Flacco, right? You don't really need to give these guys a month to figure out what they are at quarterback. So that's why I think Shador will play last no matter what, right? Like, he's going to see some inactive days for the Cleveland Browns to start the year, no matter what. That's my hot take on it. Maybe it's not even a hot take at this point. Unless he lights up camp and he's undeniable, then it's more than likely he's going to be inactive. And if he's not inactive, then that's probably a good thing for the Cleveland Browns, or somebody got injured. But Dillon, if Shador is able to, in the coach's eyes, become more of a priority than Dillon Gabriel because of how he's performing in practice, then that means that a lot of your worries about him pre-draft that weren't about the tape, you can throw out, because Dillon Gabriel is not going to be beat, or you're not going to look better than Dillon Gabriel if you aren't preparing, if you aren't putting everything you have into it, if you aren't working really hard behind the scenes. You're not going to look better than Dillon Gabriel, right? Dillon Gabriel is not a scrub. This is a really good football player. He's been a really good football player for 6 years in college football in the top conferences. So you're not going to outdo him if you aren't working just as hard as him, right? And if Shador looks more promising than Dillon Gabriel in camp and is on par with Dillon with his understanding of what the Browns are trying to do, then that's a very good sign. Doesn't mean you play him over Dillon. I think Dillon will play before him. But it does mean that, okay, now you have a bit of a litmus test for Shador to see if he's ready for more. So the more I think about it, the more I understand the Dillon Gabriel pick. Ultimately, would I have been happy with like a wide receiver or something like that there? Probably. But I understand why they did what they did. Let me know what you think about that Dillon Gabriel pick. Has your mind changed after seeing how the Browns have handled the rest of the draft and thinking about it just a little bit more? Let me know in the comment section down below.